He stood on that stage, arms stretched wide, head lifted toward the light as thousands of voices echoed his words back to him. They called him anointed. They said his voice could move mountains, and to many, it did. Packed pews every Sunday, television broadcasts beamed into homes across the nation, donations pouring in from believers who clung to every syllable that left his lips. His name was Reverend Elijah Ward, a man praised by politicians, sought after by celebrities, and trusted by those who had no one else to believe in. To his followers, he was the embodiment of truth. A spiritual father. A man of purpose, of unwavering faith, who turned scripture into poetry and promises into visions. They clung to his sermons like lifelines, his every word a balm for broken hearts. He wore grace like a custom suit. He fed the poor. He healed the sick. At least, that's what the headlines said, but headlines don't tell you everything. No camera lingered on the way his eyes flinched, just slightly, when his daughter entered the room unannounced. No congregation member caught the silence that stretched a little too long after someone mentioned the name of a man who had vanished from the church's accounting team. And no one paid attention when his wife stopped smiling altogether, yet someone did notice. Her name was Naomi. She was 23. Bright. Filmmaker. Born into this empire of worship and wealth, but never quite comfortable within its gilded walls. She knew every corner of the sanctuary, every creaky board in the hallway, every coded phrase her father used when speaking in whispers on the phone. She had always trusted him. Until she didn't. One night, while he was away on another leadership retreat, Naomi wandered into his study. A room she had been told never to enter. The door was unlocked. What she found wasn't just shocking, it was incomprehensible. Ledgers coded in initials she didn't recognize. Envelopes stuffed with cash. Photos of men who weren't members of the church, men with tattoos, weapons, dead eyes. And then the phone. His private phone. The one he never left behind. It was on the desk, buzzing. She answered, and everything she thought she knew about the man she called Dad began to dissolve, because the voice on the other end didn't ask for Reverend Ward. It asked for Ghost. And it didn't ask if the shipment had arrived. It asked how many kilos were left to move. This is the story of a daughter who uncovered a secret so enormous, it would shake the foundations of faith, destroy a legacy built over decades, and place a target squarely on her back. A story where trust was weaponized. Where loyalty was tested. And where redemption came at the highest possible cost. Welcome to the case of Reverend Elijah Ward. You're watching The Gospel Cartel, Atlanta, Georgia. Summer of 2022. The city hummed with life, a blend of southern tradition and urban ambition. Skyscrapers rose above century-old churches. Gospel choirs rehearsed just a block away from million-dollar law firms. And nestled in the heart of it all stood the River of Life Dominion Cathedral, a gleaming monument of glass and steel that could seat 10,000 souls. This was Reverend Elijah Ward's Kingdom. 6 services every Sunday. A broadcast ministry reaching 4 continents. Book deals. A line of luxury faith-based wellness products. From the outside, he was everything America wanted in a spiritual leader: charismatic, compassionate, commanding. He had a smile that seemed to part clouds. He was the man called upon to bless inaugurations and funerals alike, always dressed immaculately, always speaking with a warmth that made strangers feel like old friends. But this story doesn't begin with him. It begins with Naomi. She was born in December of 1999, on a rainy afternoon that kept her father from preaching the Christmas Eve service for the first time in his adult life. She grew up in a mansion with spiral staircases and security cameras in every hallway. Private tutors, charity galas, and the weight of a last name that meant something in the city. She knew how to pose for cameras by the age of 7. But there were cracks, moments that didn't make sense. Conversations that stopped the second she walked into the room. The hush that settled over family dinners when her father's phone buzzed. Still, she believed. That's what children do. They believe the stories they're told. Her mother, Camilla Ward, was a woman of elegance and silence. She smiled when expected, stood beside her husband on stage, and rarely answered questions with more than a sentence. To many, she was the picture of grace. But to Naomi, she was a portrait painted in restraint. A woman whose eyes were always searching for something, or someone, just out of frame. And then there was Tamara Lewis, the church's executive assistant. Loyal, efficient, always by the Reverend's side. She had been with the ministry for over 15 years. To most, she was just another staff member. To Naomi, she was something else entirely. The way Tamara spoke to her father. The way she touched his arm during meetings. The way she lingered after service, long after the rest of the staff had gone home. By spring of 2022, Naomi had grown restless. She had graduated from a prestigious film program and moved back home to document what she thought would be a behind-the-scenes look at modern ministry. Her plan was simple, a feature-length documentary on her father's legacy. She wanted to show the world the man she knew, the man who had baptized her himself, the man who taught her to stand tall, speak clearly, and never lie. But the camera sees everything. In reviewing hours of footage, Naomi began to notice patterns. Faces that returned again and again, men who never attended services but always entered through the side entrance. Her father disappearing into his study at strange hours. Conversations held behind closed doors that lasted just a little too long. Cash deliveries logged as international donations, but tied to addresses that didn't exist. She thought it was paranoia. Until the night she followed him. It was a Tuesday. A night without scheduled services. Elijah Ward left the house just after 11 p.m., dressed in jeans and a hoodie, clothing he never wore publicly. He didn't take the church car. He didn't bring security. Naomi trailed him across town to a warehouse district. No lights. No cameras. Just shadows. She parked across the street, phone in hand, heart pounding. She watched him greet a man with a scar across his cheek and a suitcase handoff that lasted all of 30 seconds. No words. No pleasantries. Just a nod, an exchange, and gone. She drove home in silence, hands trembling, mind racing. That night, she entered his study. The room had always been off limits. As a child, she had been warned, "That's where the Lord gives me my vision, Naomi." But that night, the lock was left undone, and inside, the truth waited, bundles of cash hidden behind false drawers. USB drives labeled with dates and three-letter codes. A ledger detailing shipments, quantities, drop points, times. Names she didn't recognize. Territories across state lines. A system. A network. Something far beyond anything she had ever imagined. And then the phone rang. It was a burner, buried in the back of a drawer, buzzing incessantly. On instinct, she answered. "Ghost, you're early. Did it land?" She said nothing. Just listened. "You good? You clean?" She hung up. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, her father greeted her with pancakes and a prayer, smiling like he always did, unaware that his daughter had opened the door to a truth that would soon destroy them both. The initial crime hadn't yet come to light. There was no body. No confession. No press conference. Just a daughter with a camera, a conscience, and a decision to make. Because now she knew the truth. And the truth wouldn't let her go. Naomi didn't speak of what she found, not at first, and then the paranoia began. It started with her laptop. Files disappeared. Rough cuts of her documentary, gone. Replaced with corrupted footage or nothing at all. She blamed herself at first. Thought maybe she'd made a mistake. Then came the break-in. She returned home one night from a coffee run to find the front door of her apartment slightly ajar. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. Just, disturbed. Her underwear drawer rifled through. Her camera bag unzipped. A single post-it on the kitchen counter with no handwriting. Just a single fingerprint. She reported it. The police took a statement. But there were no suspects. No follow-up. She didn't go back to that apartment. She moved back into the family estate and locked her bedroom door every night. She kept the evidence on an encrypted drive, hidden in a hollowed-out Bible that she tucked beneath her mattress. She stopped filming. She stopped going to church, and still, she wasn't safe. On a Wednesday afternoon, a man she had never seen before approached her outside a bookstore. Tall. Clean-cut. Smiling, "You Naomi?" he asked, too casually. She hesitated. "You got your daddy's eyes," he said, and handed her a small white envelope before disappearing into traffic. Inside, there were 6 photos. Surveillance style. Her in her car. Her at the coffee shop. Her sleeping, through the window. On the back of the final photo, a single sentence was scrawled: "Some things are better left untouched." She stopped eating after that, but she did start talking, first to her friend Jordan, a fellow filmmaker who had helped her edit footage in the past. She showed him everything. The ledgers. The videos. The warehouse address. Jordan begged her to go to the police. She hesitated. Her father wasn't just a man. He was a monument. If she was wrong, even slightly, the fallout would be catastrophic, but if she was right, someone would try to kill her. Then came the silence. Tamara Lewis stopped showing up to the church office. No explanation. No farewell. Her social media accounts wiped clean. The church issued a vague statement about her pursuing other opportunities, but Naomi wasn't buying it. She broke into her father's office again. This time, she found a photo of Tamara and her father, together in a villa in Cabo San Lucas. The photo was recent. Less than a month old. She began recording everything. Phone calls. Conversations. Hidden camera footage of meetings with church officials. And in every whisper, every look, every coded phrase, she heard the same message: they knew. Or at least, they suspected, but they wouldn't speak. Not on the record. Not to her. Too much to lose. Too many secrets built into the foundation of that church. Naomi's hands shook every time she picked up the camera. But she kept going, and then one day, her father came home early. She was in the study again, reviewing footage. She didn't hear the car pull up. Didn't hear the door open. She only heard his voice, right behind her. "What are you doing in here?" She turned. He was smiling, but his eyes were cold. "Searching, filming," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He walked closer. "This room isn't part of your documentary." She wanted to run. But she didn't. Instead, she stared at him. Into him. "Searching for the father she used to know, are you?" "Ghost?" she asked. He froze. For a long time, he said nothing, then he chuckled. Just once. Low. Dry. "You've always had such an imagination." That was all he said before leaving the room. The next morning, the drive with all her footage was gone, and Naomi realized something terrifying: her father knew. And now, he was watching her. From that moment forward, every second felt like a countdown. To what, she didn't know. But the air had changed. The house was no longer a home. It was a waiting room. Jordan offered to contact someone at the DEA, a distant cousin who owed him a favor. Naomi agreed. She handed over the ledgers. The photos. The recordings, and then. Silence. Days passed. No word from the agency. No calls returned. Then one morning, she turned on the news. A man was found dead behind a warehouse in East Point. No ID. No wallet. Only a phone with a text thread open. The last message sent: "Drop is late." Ghost said wait. She recognized the phone model. It was the same one she had seen in her father's drawer. She turned off the TV and called Jordan. No answer. She called again. No answer. She drove to his apartment. The front door was open. His laptop was smashed. Blood on the floor. No Jordan. She called the police. They never found him. Naomi's hands would not stop shaking. The walls were closing in. Her father began praying louder at dinner. Preaching longer on Sundays. His sermons turned toward betrayal. Toward loyalty. Toward judgment. He stared at her more now. Eyes steady. Smiling, she didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She barely breathed, and still, she filmed everything, because she had crossed the point of no return, and she knew, whether it came from her father, or someone he paid, she was running out of time. Naomi's world was closing in by inches. Every street felt unfamiliar. Every glance too long. Every silence too thick. She started sleeping in her car, parking in different lots each night, her camera bag clutched like a life preserver. Her phone had become a tool of survival, recording everything, backing up data to cloud servers under anonymous names, contacting journalists through encrypted apps, and then, the footage surfaced that it wasn't hers. A package arrived at a local news station in Atlanta, anonymous sender, no return address. Inside, a flash drive, the anchor who received it was skeptical. But curiosity won. On it was surveillance footage, dated and time-stamped, showing Reverend Elijah Ward inside the very warehouse Naomi had followed him to weeks prior. It captured him unloading duffel bags from an unmarked SUV, handing them off to men whose faces were already familiar to federal agents. One of those men had been found dead 2 weeks later behind that same warehouse. The news aired the footage without hesitation. By nightfall, the city was on fire. Naomi watched from a motel room 3 counties away. Her father's face filled every screen. Celebrity preacher tied to drug network. Reverend Elijah Ward under federal investigation. Community in disbelief, the church went into immediate lockdown. Lawyers were dispatched. Social media accounts scrubbed. Supporters split into 2 camps, those who swore it was fake, a setup, an attack on faith itself, and those who had quietly suspected something for years but never dared say it aloud. But Naomi knew this wasn't the climax, this was just the fuse catching flame. Within 48 hours, DEA agents raided the warehouse. Inside, cocaine. Millions in cash. Guns. One ledger, half-burned, matching the codes Naomi had seen in her father's drawer. A case was building. Fast, Naomi received a call that night from a blocked number. She didn't answer. A minute later, a voicemail appeared. She didn't recognize the voice. You think they're gonna protect you? You're on his list. You're always on the list once you open the door. She forwarded it to her encrypted backup, heart pounding, tears burning. Her father hadn't called. Not once. Not to deny. Not to warn. Not to explain, until that Sunday that he took the pulpit for what would be the last time. The sanctuary was packed, though quieter than usual. Cameras rolled, live streams open. The choir did not sing. Reverend Elijah Ward stepped up, eyes heavy. His Bible closed. He didn't read a verse. Instead, he told a story. A parable of betrayal. Of a daughter who had lost her way. Who had allowed the enemy to sow confusion and lies. Who had fallen prey to voices that worked in shadows. He never said her name. He didn't have to. Naomi watched from a diner. The TV was muted, but the captioning ran across the bottom of the screen like a sentence being carved in stone. Her heart became prideful. Her pride became rebellion. And her rebellion bore destruction. She left the diner before the sermon ended. That night, she received another message. No words. Just a video. It showed her mother, Camilla, sitting in a car outside the cathedral. Then another angle, inside the house. The kitchen. Camilla washing dishes, unaware of the lens watching her from across the room. The message was clear. We know where she is. Naomi broke. She called the federal contact Jordan had once mentioned. She gave them everything. Her name. Her location. Her footage. Her copies of the ledgers. Her story. She asked only one thing: protect her mother. The raid came 3 days later. FBI and DEA agents stormed the Ward estate before dawn. Camilla was pulled from the home in her robe, weeping. The Reverend was found in his study, seated behind his desk, a gold-plated Bible in front of him. He didn't resist. He didn't run. He didn't speak. On his desk was a note, just one sentence: he who is without sin. But this wasn't confession, this was control. His arraignment, he pled not guilty. His lawyers claimed video manipulation. Fabricated evidence. They called Naomi unstable. They released statements questioning her motives, her mental health, even her relationships, but Naomi had receipts, and one more piece of evidence, the burner phone, recovered from her car's emergency kit. Untouched. Undetected, inside, dozens of text threads, GPS logs, and one audio file, an accidental recording made during a meeting between Ward and a cartel intermediary. The words were damning. Incriminating. Precise, and then the voice, make sure she doesn't talk. I don't care how. That voice was Elijah Ward. That clip aired nationwide, and 3 weeks later, a federal grand jury indicted the Reverend on 17 counts, including conspiracy to traffic narcotics, money laundering, and attempted witness intimidation. The trial was scheduled for the fall, but he never made it there. On a hot July morning, he was found dead in his cell. No signs of struggle. No note. No explanation. The autopsy would later reveal a rare South American toxin in his bloodstream, undetectable through standard prison screenings. The case was officially closed, but Naomi knew that he hadn't taken his life. Someone had finished what he'd started, and in doing so, they left only questions behind. Naomi didn't cry, not when she heard he was gone. Not when the news anchors began speaking of him in past tense, dressing his legacy in soft language and gilded phrases. A tragic fall. A complicated man. Gone too soon. She didn't go to the funeral, the church filled beyond capacity, people lining the walls and spilling into the courtyard, all seeking some form of closure, or spectacle. Some cried for the man they thought he was. Others watched for a glimpse of the woman who had shattered it all, but Naomi stayed away. She sat alone in a diner booth off I-20, headphones in, watching her father's last sermon on a cracked tablet screen. Not for his words, but for what she missed the first time, the micro-expressions, the way his hand trembled as he spoke, the moment his eyes scanned the crowd, not with faith, but with calculation that he knew it was ending long before the world did, and yet, even in death, he had power. The morning after the funeral, Naomi received a manila envelope under her motel door. No name. No return address. Inside, photographs. Dozens. Her. Jordan. Her mother. The DEA agents. Their families. All time-stamped. All recent, and a final note, justice comes in many forms. Choose yours carefully. The case, they said, was closed, but Naomi had learned by now, cases are never truly closed. They just get buried. Covered with time, with silence, with new tragedies that steal attention, and yet, whispers still surfaced, about bodies in riverbeds. About land deeds passed through shell companies. About church donations that spiked and vanished within hours. The cartel wasn't gone. It had just changed faces. Changed methods. The church's new leader, Pastor Jonathan Deeks, stood in the pulpit just 1 week after Elijah's death, preaching forgiveness. Unity. Moving forward. But Naomi had found something else in her father's safe before the raid. A list, dozens of names, some crossed out in red ink. Some circled. Some starred. Her name had 3 stars beside it. Jordan's had a line through it. Camilla's, her mother, was boxed in blue. The list wasn't a ledger. It was a map. Of who mattered. Who was expendable. Who had to disappear. Naomi sent it to the FBI, they never responded. So she did the only thing she knew how, she began to tell the story, piece by piece. Publicly. No more hiding. She released the documentary under a pseudonym, but within weeks, the world had connected the dots. The footage was raw, painful, scattered with moments of fear and fury. Viewers watched as she documented her father's duplicity, the evidence he buried, the lies he wrapped in scripture. It spread like wildfire. Interviews followed. Podcasts. A book deal. People called her brave. A survivor. A whistleblower, but the truth, she didn't feel brave. She felt broken, because for every person who thanked her, another threatened her. Messages poured in. Some from survivors of similar abuse. Others from loyalists, those who still believed Elijah Ward had been framed. That Naomi was a liar. A Judas. A daughter who murdered her own father with lies and cameras. She lived like a ghost after that, changing numbers. Changing cities. Looking over her shoulder. But still filming, because the story wasn't over, and the world keeps watching. Because the story of Reverend Elijah Ward didn't end with a trial. Or a death. Or even a confession that it ended with a daughter who refused to be silent. And a world that learned, far too late, that even angels can deal in cocaine. Camilla Ward, Naomi's mother, was placed into protective custody and eventually relocated under a new identity. She never spoke to the press. Never gave an interview. But in a handwritten letter released through Naomi's publisher, she wrote one sentence that lingered in the public consciousness: "I loved a man I did not know. And I lost a daughter who refused to let the truth die with him." Jordan, the childhood friend turned whistleblower, now worked with international watchdog organizations, helping trace cartel money through shell charities and fraudulent nonprofits. He, too, lived a quiet life. Cautious. Watchful. But never silent. The city of Atlanta transformed. Not in an instant, but like a fever breaking. The church building that once housed Elijah Ward's empire was sold. Stripped. Turned into a community shelter by a nonprofit started by victims of religious fraud. The grand stained glass windows, once depicting biblical scenes, were replaced with plain glass, and Naomi, no one knew for certain, but here's the truth no one wants to admit: this wasn't just one preacher. It wasn't just one church. It wasn't just one lie wrapped in scripture. That it was a system. Built on trust, protected by silence, and fed by the very people it claimed to save. And systems like that don't vanish when a man dies. They adapt. They evolve. They find new names, new faces, new titles. So the question now is simple: what are you going to do? Will you keep scrolling? Keep consuming these stories like entertainment? Naomi gave everything. Her safety. Her family. Her peace. Just to tell the truth, would you? Because somewhere right now, another daughter is watching her father lie to a congregation. Another whistleblower is wondering if speaking up is worth the cost. Another community is worshiping a man who isn't who he says he is, and they're waiting for someone like you to ask the questions no one else will. If this story made you think, made you feel, made you look again at what truth costs, then don't let it end here. Leave a comment. Tell us what you saw that others missed. Share your thoughts, your theories. Speak for the voiceless. Ask what justice really means when the guilty wear halos and the victims are asked to pray through the pain. And if you're ready to uncover more truths like this one, subscribe. Because these stories, they're everywhere, and someone has to keep telling them. Someone has to keep asking, who watches the shepherd? When the flock is blind, we'll be here. Watching. Listening. Searching. And we won't stop. Until the next truth is found.